Are we okay to start? Okay, okay. I will call this meeting to order. Dr. Yarborough, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. All right, we'll start with public comments. Dr. White, Dr. Joyner.
Okay, to the people who are going to speak tonight, you have 3 minutes. When you reach the end of the 3 minutes, I'll ask you to complete your sentence. And I also ask you to observe rules of courtesy and respect in your comments. Thank you very much, and we're ready. I have the timer.
Okay, our first speaker is Maxie Han.
Oh, okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nancy Han. I am a sophomore at Wilbercross High School and a member of New Haven Climate Movement. Thanksgiving is generally a time to reflect on what we are most grateful for. And today I would like to share a list of 5 things I am most thankful for. 5 things that we are putting in jeopardy for future generations by our inaction and lack of urgency in a climate emergency. 1, a home that is not routinely submerged under several feet of water. Sea levels in New Haven are projected to rise an estimated 20 inches by 2050, leading to a significant increase in flooding. In the future, how will the school system provide support to students and families whose lives and livelihoods are destroyed by floods? 2, access to food. Estimates indicate that by 2100, climate change-related disasters and other effects linked to our warming planet will render 8% of available farmland unsuitable for growing crops. This comes at a time when the human population is expected to reach 11.2 billion. How will the school system provide free meals to students as food insecurity widens its grasp around the world, in our country, and in our city? 3, healthy and clean air year-round. We have all experienced firsthand the smoke from Canadian wildfires this year, which posed a significant health risk to vulnerable groups and disrupted daily activities for several days. In a future with an increase in such events, how will the school system provide resources to protect its students from the adverse health effects of constantly breathing in fine particulate matter? 4, minimal days of extreme heat. As the continual release of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere spurs an unprecedented warming of our planet, heat waves will become the new normal. Going forward, will the school system need to incorporate early dismissals due to scorching temperatures into its calendar? 5, biodiversity. In recent decades, the rate of extinction has increased exponentially. Habitat loss, climate change-related disasters, and declining ecosystems are fueling what some scientists identify as a 6th mass extinction. In the future, what will children think when they learn about biodiversity, the building blocks of life, photosynthesis, while at the same time witnessing firsthand the collapse of entire species and ecosystems? There are financial costs associated with implementing climate solutions in our school district, but the costs of climate catastrophe are far greater. It is the time to act is now. Think about the simple things we take for granted now that may be unavailable for future generations of New Haven Public School students 20, 30, 50 years from now. What will those children write on their gratitude list for Thanksgiving if we fail to act? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your courtesy.
Our next speaker is Rosie Hampson.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, members of the Board of Education. My name is Rosie Hampson. I'm 17 years old and a senior at Wilbercross High School. I'm also a member of the Climate Education Committee of the New Haven Climate Movement. Tonight, I would like to reflect first upon the two popular holidays we are between, one to celebrate the scary and the other to give thanks for the good. In thinking of the scary, so much comes to my mind unrelated to the usual holiday themes of ghosts and ghouls, because as a young person, thinking about climate change is terrifying, and unlike the creatures of Halloween, only too real. So many frightening things have been happening, children being displaced due to floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes, families losing their homes, forced to leave behind loved ones, 45 million children suffering from starvation. If this time of year is to acknowledge the scary and unsettling, I don't know anything more terrifying than the impacts of climate change. Yet with so many frightening things happening across the world, I realize I have so much to be thankful for. Clean drinking water and good food to eat, for having access to healthcare, education, and countless opportunities which girls and women in many developing countries do not have, and for the ability to live without fear of losing my home or family members to an unprecedented disaster. I am deeply thankful for all of these things, which climate change has robbed from many youth in poor communities and developing countries. But most of all, I am thankful for the vast opportunities we have to create positive changes here in New Haven. I'm here tonight to ask that the Board of Education recognize this opportunity and take action so no more damage is wreaked upon vulnerable communities and the children of New Haven. Through hiring a coordinator for climate education in our public schools, you can ensure that the youth have the knowledge we need in this time of climate catastrophe. Through hiring staff to oversee food service and transportation projects in our schools, your actions will be giving back to the earth, while also saving money on waste pickup costs, money which can then be used to benefit our public schools. Finally, hiring an energy coordinator to replace inefficient energy systems in schools will both reduce our emissions and provide long-term savings by reducing the cost of outdated systems. As the Board of Education, you have the means to implement these changes. We understand that hiring new staff to oversee these projects requires an initial investment. But as described, doing so will save money for our schools in the long term. And the sooner action is taken, the less harm will be inflicted upon the low-income communities and especially children of New Haven. Especially considering the additional $43 million funding the board has received from ESSER, in addition to the regular $400 million budget. The Board of Ed is in a better position to take immediate action on cutting fossil fuel emissions and integrating climate education than you will likely be in the future. Allocating only 0.07% of your available funds, $300,000, would enable 3 new climate staff or consultants to be hired this year. With this amazing opportunity to take action to protect the people in vulnerable communities of New Haven, please do not delay. As a side note, we would also greatly appreciate a chance to talk to you, Dr. Negron, our new superintendent, to hear your thoughts on climate action projects in NHPS schools. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Barbara Sasso.
I didn't bring sticky stuff to hold this up, and I could just show this to everybody. So this is a poster that students at Wilbur Cross High School created to promote our pilot composting program in the school. So let me introduce myself. So my name is Barbara Sasso. I taught in New Haven Public Schools for 26 years, retired last year to come back as the compost lady. And it couldn't make me happier to not be standing in front of sleeping teenagers, but to actually have like hands-on work for kids to do. So our goal really is to create a pilot program that can be implemented in all the schools in the district and potentially save the school system's money while helping the environment. If you compost waste instead of burying it in a landfill, you reduce carbon gases, but you're also not hauling away hundreds tons of waste from each school each month. In our short little foray into composting, we've gathered over 100 pounds of food waste a day in the Wilbur Cross cafeteria. We are also diverting food that students don't want to eat to a share table, and that share table has become a very popular place in the cafeteria when the lunch wave is over. When kids are still hungry, or they still want apples, or they still want snacks, but they don't want to look like, you know, they're taking it from their friends or whatever. One of the teachers, it's just one teacher in the school, gathers baskets of apples on her desk. In 2 days, they're gone. So it's not like these are just going to go to waste anyway. people want them. The diverted table is moving tens of pounds a day or more out of the landfill. So I think it's, we got a grant last year from the Greater New Haven Green Fund, small little grant, to have what's his name, Domingo Medina and Peels on Wheels to come and pick up from Wilbur Cross High School. So it is just in the beginning of a pilot program. He's going to be coming 2 days a week next week. We hope to expand this to a full week, full on force in the cafeteria. I'm doing this because I'm retired. Why couldn't I do this when I was teaching? Because when you're teaching, that's a full-time job and a half. And if you have kids, it's like 5 jobs. So we really need to fund me, not me now, but me for the future. Somebody who could be there to instruct students. And believe me, kids are asking about composting. They're interested in it. Most of the kids in the school system don't want to waste food. You know, we have a lot of kids who are coming from different places where food resources are scarce, and they are very eager to put that food somewhere else to better use than in the trash. So this is a pilot program that I think will be really effective across the school system and just needs a little bit of funding for somebody to instruct the students, get it launch it in different schools, get student volunteers to help, and it passes it forward to the next generation. So thank you very much for your time. And
Thank you.
I'll be in touch with all of you soon. There we go.
Our next speaker is Adrian Huck. They may speak.
Good evening, BOE members. My name is Adrian Huck, and I'm an organizer with the New Haven Climate Movement and a 2020 graduate from Metropolitan Business Academy. I'm also the youth coordinator for the Climate Health Education Project, and I help lead the Climate Justice Schools Initiative, which is one of our programs that is funded by the City of New Haven. As you know, in September 2022, the BOE approved our climate emergency resolution, which had several points surrounding achieving sustainable operations for the school district. However, we believe that to fully realize the goals of the resolution, the BOE must invest in expanding their capacity to take on this specialized work. We are aware that NHPS has yet to spend $43 million of its federal pandemic relief ESSER funding, and this is in addition to the BOE's regular budget for the school year, which currently totals over $400 million. So given the climate emergency, NHCM demands that the BOE commit $300,000 from ESSER funds or the 2023-24 budget towards the hiring of climate-related staff. We envision this funding to cover the hiring of 3 new staff members or consultants who will oversee climate education, energy efficiency, promotion of healthy transportation, and waste reduction initiatives in NHPS. Given my background in climate education youth programming, I'd like to talk today about the need to hire a climate education staff member. As you may recall, the BOE approved our Climate Justice Schools proposal in 2021, which would foster youth leadership around climate change in participating middle and high schools and integrate interdisciplinary climate education into each of our core area subjects. However, without a particular staff member to assign this work to, the responsibility to run the program and to follow up with curriculum supervisors on incorporating climate education has fallen on NHCM members like myself to head. The dysfunction that we have been met with in collaborating with the BOE has forced us to run this program by ourselves, unfortunately. So having a staff member focused on climate education efforts would allow programming like Climate Justice Schools to run smoothly, solidify the inclusion of climate change into our curriculum, encourage project-based learning, and more. So we hope to see the BOE put funding towards your current climate and sustainability goals so that this work can meaningfully move forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Young In Kim.
Good evening, board members. My name is Young In Kim, and I'm a proud New Haven Public Schools alum. I've attended NHPS since first grade and graduated from Wilbur Cross High School this past June. I'm also a member of the New Haven Climate Movement, and I wanted to bring attention to the initiatives and projects students in New Haven Public Schools carried out last year. 2 students from ESUMS worked with 7th grade science and English teachers to implement climate education into the curriculum. Students from Wilbur Cross High School distributed a transportation survey throughout middle and high schools in New Haven to gauge how to create more opportunities for green transportation among students. And furthermore, as Ms. Sasso spoke earlier, Wilbur Cross High School students also implemented a pilot composting project in the spring, working with Peels and Wheels Composting to collect food scraps from students during lunch waves. And students this year are also carrying out these projects and more, with more passionate youth. Students of New Haven love our schools and care for our schools. We wish to create an environment that promotes a green future, and we try to make for ourselves an environment where students are alert of the risks of climate change, and we act upon the climate emergency. I'm thankful this holiday season because our students are so passionate and advocate for themselves. However, despite passing the climate emergency resolution last year, the New Haven Public School District has not taken action to implement climate projects in the schools as the students have. We ask that the Board of Education commit $300,000 to hire dedicated climate staff to implement effective and cost-saving climate projects to oversee climate education, energy efficiency, and healthy transportation. We know that this will make a huge difference in climate mitigation in the district, and it will also show the students that the Board of Education truly cares about the well-being and the future of our youth. This season, we're thankful for our teachers, our students, and our schools, and we hope that the Board of Education will take action to create an environment and have that to create an environment of a healthy future and to have dedicated climate staff. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Our last speaker will be Leslie Blateau.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Leslie Blateau. I'm a teacher and parent in New Haven and the president of the New Haven Federation of Teachers. I would like to express my gratitude to the New Haven Climate Movement. As you are expressing your gratitude, I think it's time that some people say thank you to you. You are examples to us about how to organize, how to show up, and how to commit to a clear task that's going to benefit everyone. So on behalf of the teachers who spend time with you every day, and who spent time with the graduates, thank you. We support you in this work. We know it's complicated with respect to funding, but Rosie's point that the long-term gains from this are possible is very important to note, that we can in the long term save money while also what's doing right for our young people. And as a mom and as somebody who lives in a community affected by asthma and other things, this is real, and I'm grateful to you all for showing us how it's done. Thank you. I also want to connect to an event that we're having at Career High School on Saturday, this Saturday, November 18th. We're going to have a statewide coalition where we bring people together from around the state to talk about how we can protect public schools, but also transform public schools. I think we're watching the transformation of public schools right before our eyes as we're seeing these young activists remind us of what's important about schools. They will remember these lessons. And as a teacher, what do we want? We want our students to remember the lessons that we're teaching them. Another connection is our keynote speaker at this event is New York Congressman Jamal Bowman, a strong advocate for public schools and one of the sponsors of the Green New Deals for Schools Act that he raised at the congressional level. So climate activists, join us. Parents and caregivers, join us. Educators, community members, please join us. We want to work together to make sure that our public schools in New Haven and across the state have what we need to meet the needs of our students and families. So thank you to climate activists. If folks are interested in more information about this statewide summit happening at Career this Saturday, just go to our website, nhft933.org. It'll be from 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Breakfast, lunch, childcare, interpretation services will be provided. And this is a coalition event, not just NHFT, but public education advocates from around the state coming together. Thank you for the time this evening.
Thank you.
Madam President, that concludes all speakers.
Thank you, Dr. White and Dr. Joyner. We'll move on to the approval of the board meeting minutes for our October 23rd meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, I motion to approve the minutes of the October
Thank you.
23rd meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Is there a second?
Second, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson. Any discussion?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Goldson, and then Dr. Yarborough?
Two things. One is on page 2, item number 4. At the end of the 169-23 is it looks like a sentence just ended. There's something missing there. I'm not quite sure what's supposed to be missing. But the other thing about this motion is that we spent a lot of time trying to make this motion very specific with the language. And this language is not specific at all. So am I missing something somewhere? I looked in the page in our board packages for the actual motion document, and it is as non-specific as this is in the minutes. And our attorney was very clear that he wanted us to be as specific as possible in order for him to be able to amend the MOU, and this doesn't seem to reach that threshold that he asked for. For instance, when we talked about security, we didn't talk about having a security guard on site for the entire day. We just talked about short periods at the beginning when they opened and at the end when they closed. So I'm wondering why, maybe the attorney could address this, why the minutes don't reflect what we passed.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson. I don't see Attorney Alexiadis, but let me move on.
He's here. Hiding in a corner of
He's
it.
hiding.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, Chairperson, and board members. I defer to the board members on the terms of the accuracy of the minutes and the accuracy of the motions. I drafted it as best that I understood it from the meeting, but it is your prerogative to make sure that it comports with your discussion. I mean, I went back and listened to the video, watched the video before finalizing the document. And you should check to make sure the document conforms with the minutes, but I think it's the document that controls, which you all should also have. And should be part of the minutes, but I don't think it is.
Mr. Goldson?
Thank you, Madam President. The mayor particularly, but the administration was concerned that adding a security guard position to this contract would price it out of the city's ability to be able to actually do it. So if this says a security guard on site, and the attorney left. If this says a security guard on site, we certainly don't want to put an extra burden on the administration by having a security guard there 8 hours out of the day, or 10 hours, 12 hours, I guess it is. It's from 7 to 7, I guess, that the hours are, so 12 hours a day. That we were clear that wasn't what we were looking for. And I'm just, does the administration need for us to clarify this further, or are they good with that? I don't want this to be used. I don't want this motion to be used to either outprice the administration's ability to be able to pay for this, or to be used as an excuse not to do what we asked them to do.
Madam
Thank you,
Chair,
Mr. Goldson. Hold on, Dr. Joyner. Dr. Yarborough was next, and then I can call on you. And Mr. Wilcox.
Thank you. I also was looking at that section and noticed that the last paragraph had some missing information, missing ending to the sentence, and also some unclear information. So my ask was going to be for a review of the recording to pull out exactly what the specificities of the motion were at that time, and to include that accurately in the record.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Dr. Joyner, and then Mr. Wilcox.
I'm going to withdraw my motion because I think in the interest of efficiency, the most practical thing would be to go back and do all those things that were suggested.
I
And
was
get
my
that,
second.
and get that information to the board and to the superintendent to make sure they meet the conditions that Mr. Golson and Dr. Yarborough indicated should be met in terms of specificity. Because we can spend the rest of the night talking about this.
Yes, and we don't want to do that. Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Wilcox? Oh, you're all set. Okay, thank you. So that motion has been withdrawn. The second is withdrawn.
Minutes don't match the document.
I don't know what that means. You might want to, I think,
No, that's fine. We'll address it after.
Okay.
All right, thank you. The next item is the discussion and possible action, second reading for part 6,000 of the policy series.
Yes, good evening, board members and community. In your packets, you should have found, again, policies 6145.3, that is student publications, that includes newspapers, and any publication that students may want to publish and share with each other or the public. Also, 6145.4 is about school productions. That also is presumable that is productions that will be shared among students, but also with the public. 6161.1 is evaluation of instructional materials. That one has A, that ensures high standards, B, that makes sure that gender roles encourage all and boost self-esteem in any of the materials that that the district decides to utilize. C talks about ethnic and cultural groups and how they may be portrayed. Also owners and labor. In other words, what kinds of jobs and roles different individuals involved in the labor market are portrayed. And of course, we want them to be portrayed with dignity. And we do not want to see brands, like commercial brands or unhealthy foods in those materials that we pick to use with our students. In 6146.2, we are, that is about mastery examination. A is a general statement. B is about multilingual students and alternate assessments. And the next one is 6200. A, it's adult education program that we say we want to have one. And B, that what are the requirements for credits? In that, I hope you were able to see that we are inclusive of experiential credit, which is important for our adult students. And that, what I would like is for you to, I would like to make a motion for you to approve these new policies to replace the old ones.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez and Dr. Joyner. Is there a discussion? Ms. Cruz Bustamante?
Yes, thank you. My only thing with this policy is 6145.3, the introduction to student publications. At the bottom, it says optional language. Students shall have the right to appeal the exercise of pre-publication or pre-production control by district staff to the board. I think it's important that that be included in the policy language and that it not be optional.
Where is that at again?
It's at the, if you look at 6145.3, at the end, it says that students are able to appeal to the board.
Madam Chair,
It's section A or B?
Dr. Joyner?
First page.
I agree with Dave on this. And I think that the legal precedent for it is the Tinker case, which was decided in 1969, which is really I guess the basis for all of this. And essentially, what it says that public school students maintain their First Amendment rights within a school's jurisdiction through school officials. Those school officials retain authority to maintain a safe and effective school environment. So in the Tinker case, those students were protesting the Vietnam War, and they were punished for it. And that was a violation of their free speech. The one thing that the Constitution should have said should be free and responsible speech, with some notion of what responsible meant. In this context, it means that students don't have the right to, or adults, to publish stuff that threatens the safety and security of the school environment. So I'm in a complete agreement with Mr. Bustamante on this one. And I think it should be included in the text and not put in as a sort of parenthetical textual statement about it. And it's constitutionally protected. And let me thank Mr. Bustamante for, I don't know if he's familiar with the Tinker case, but you're on solid legal ground and constitutional ground for your statement regarding that.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Wilcox?
And then,
Hold on.
sorry.
Mr. Wilcox?
Yes, so I think that as it's listed here, even though it says it's optional language, if the board passes it tonight, I think optional language becomes part of the language. So I think that unlike other places where language is struck out, this language is here. So unless we took action to strike it out, I think that the optional language would just become that. And I think when this is put up on the website, it should be, things like optional language or notes could be removed to reflect what the board passes. That's my opinion. I had one question on the policy that was I was dealing with instructional policy. So 616.1B, there's a lot of language that's changed in terms of having instructional materials where the suggested language from Connecticut Association of Boards of Education was should avoid. Now we're saying must avoid. I'm certainly in agreement with the substance if the definition of instructional materials are things like the textbooks, the curriculum materials purchased. My question is, would this include things like supplemental materials? So for instance, I could imagine a poem that might, in the poem, using just an example, might list a custom or lifestyle as undesirable, and now it must be avoided. Whereas in the curriculum, one could imagine, particularly if we're dealing with historical materials, where that would become a point of instruction. So I would want to know if we're removing the option of teachers and curriculum folks to have supplemental materials that might create issues with the changes of those musts, from shoulds to musts. So I'm wondering if that was the intention of the policy.
I think the must creates flexibility. The should doesn't. That's my understanding. But maybe Dr. Joyner Dr. Joyner or
Mhm.
Ms. Hannans, Ms. Keisha Hannans could clarify on that. But I believe that the intention was flexibility, but
Yeah, I'd like to respond.
yes.
First of
Dr.
all,
Joyner?
technically, there's no such thing as supplemental materials in a classroom. Any material that's used to advance the cause of education is considered material. Now, supplement is typically regarded as it's not the textbook or it's not the course stuff, but everything that you bring into a classroom, you bring that in under the authority of the school board, assuming that school board has good policy. And we also have to ask that our people in the buildings and in the classrooms use good judgment. For instance, if you're using an excerpt from Mark Twain and it uses the N-word, while it may have been written in that way, it is a deeply offensive term. And we have to have ways of letting students know that it was done at that time because it was allowed to be done. But it doesn't mean that we condone the use of the term because we simply use it as a teaching device. I think this policy is beautifully well written by a person who has a deep understanding of just about every aspect of education. And I think that it has to have enough flexibility for teachers to use their discretion, but then that discretion has to be responsible. And we can't allow people to bring in materials that's propaganda, that's used to further somebody's personal agenda, and so on and so forth. There's no perfect policy, but I believe that this policy gives us the broad flexibility to deal with some of the issues that people in other parts of the country would try to pretend never happened. And it's not going to be perfect, but I think that we'll like anything else, we'll amend it and make improvements as we encounter challenges and issues in the classroom and in the execution of the policy.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Wilcox, sorry.
Okay, so under that example, Dr. Joyner, is the district now banning the use of, Huck Finn from use in the classroom, since it says that we need to have an absence of descriptions that demeans stereotype?
Right. But you'd also have to ban Tupac and Heavy, well, not Heavy D, because he didn't use that language. What I think has to happen is, one, it has to be developmentally appropriate. You certainly wouldn't teach Huck Finn to certain grade levels. I also think that whenever there's provocative or incendiary or language like that in any kind of text used, you ought to let the students know in advance. If I were doing it, I would just say the N-word, because I've been on the wrong end of the use of that word so many times. But I would try to explain to the students in advance that that was written at that time when anybody that wrote about certain people could say exactly what they wanted to about them. It's not appropriate now because we've evolved. But I don't like the idea of prohibiting the teaching of anything. But we want students to be open-minded and free thinkers and to understand the context and all those other things. I used stuff like that when I was a teacher, but I didn't say the word out loud. I would just say the first letter or the word that rhymes with trigger, if it were the word that we're talking about by not talking about it tonight. So I think we're going to have to try to figure it out. I think that we should, if we say first do no harm in any type of teaching, then I'm sure that most teachers will make the decision that with offensive language or language that has been offensive, that we have to be very careful about how we use that language. Because there's sexist language, there's religious language that's offensive, there's all kinds of stuff, but we still want our students to be aware of what's going on in the world, and for teachers to have the freedom within limitations to teach stuff they deem to be appropriate for students. I'd like to know how the students feel about that.
So if I could, I'll just finish my comments now. I just want to apologize to the governance committee and to the board for not, for using tonight at the second reading to raise these issues. That I should have done this previously, so that is my fault completely. As it is, because I think the language where is making it overly restrictive, and I'm worried that the unintentional consequence would be a prohibition of these materials rather than what I think people want, which is the careful consideration of them and how they fit into a curriculum that's very well drawn. So if we vote on this tonight, I'm not going to be able to support this particular one, but I do want to make it clear. I'm in full support of the general principles that are being talked about. I'm just not comfortable with saying, because as I'm saying, you know, when we have words like, you know, shall not, or, you know, something must be, then from the letter of the law, that just starts, letter of the policy rather, not the law, but the letter of the policy, that starts, I think, to create unintended consequences for the freedom of teachers and the curriculum designers to have the things, and it's not just historical materials like current event materials to take a look at the broad sides of the issues. Some of this is, I'm a librarian, so heavy into the intellectual freedom, and so I'm not going to be supporting this one tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Dr. Yarborough?
Yes, thank you. Two questions. One is, just generally speaking, are these new additions, new policies that we're adding, or are these policies replacing existing policies?
These are the policies recommended, and you know what, I cannot answer that question.
I think I can answer it briefly. It's really the same process that's used to develop constitutional law. There's kind of revisions of stuff that was more vague, and what Dr. Benitez and Ms. Jackson have done it, along with others, is to try to make them more explicit. But with policy, you can't cover everything, and it's a constant state of execution, revision, and so on and so forth. So I'm in agreement with Mr. Wilcox. This is one of the most difficult ones in education policy. And given what's going on in the country now, we should try to maybe go back and get as much input as we possibly can from our student board members, as well as our teachers, our union leaders, and what have you, as well as people in the community. Because, you know, there's a wide variance of opinion in this community about a whole bunch of things, trans, sexual orientation, all that other kind of stuff. But we should rely on the Constitution as our guide. And I think Dr. Benitez has done a pretty good job there. But as you know, the Constitution is not a perfect document either. So.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Golton?
Thank you, Madam President. When I first started reading this, first of all, I have to apologize, Mr. Wilcox, that I didn't review this before I got to the board meeting. But I did skim through this during the board meeting, just before we started, and during the board meeting, and my little hair stuck up on the back of my head, back of my neck, and the reason why is that I see a creep that we keep talking against in the rest of the country, and I see that creep. I mean, good intentions or not, when you start going down this road, it becomes easier and easier to do more and more things. I think the Huck Finn description is a perfect example. I don't let that word define me, and I don't let people use that word to have power over me. Quite frankly, I don't really care about the word. If somebody wants to use it, I'm gonna laugh at them, because I don't want them to think they have power over me, because they don't when they use that word. I am not how they describe me, whatever that description may be. I know who I am, and I describe myself. So I don't let that word get to me. But when it's educational material, something that we've all have had access to in our youth. I can't remember if it was elementary school and middle school when I first read Huck Finn. I mean, but I was fairly young. And you cannot learn from your past if you try to destroy your past. You know, you try to hide your past. You can't learn from it. So I have some real concerns about that language. I also have some concerns about 6145.3, the third page, I guess, 0.3b, where it talks about endorsement of political candidates or ballot measures. Since when do students don't have opinions? You know, and why would we want to eliminate their ability to be able to voice their opinions? Now, we could say, okay, if there is one opinion favoring one side, there should be another opinion favoring another side to equal it out, but just to eliminate their ability to be able to have an opinion on a candidate or a ballot measure, especially if that ballot measure was related to education and educational funding, for instance, or student-related activities, to now say they can't even have an opinion, they can give a fact sheet, but they can't have an opinion, is, for me, counterintuitive for what we should be doing and what we should be teaching them. So I understand you guys put a lot of work in this, and I respect that, and I apologize for not being there when you were putting the work in to voice these concerns earlier. But at this point, I don't feel comfortable, as Mr. Wilcox has says, to support some of the stuff in this. And just one third final point, in the future, if we are going to have something come back to us to approve, let's just wipe out the two words optional language, you know, and make it that simple so nobody gets confused in the future for what we're trying to do here. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson. Any further discussion? Dr. Yarborough?
Yes, thank you. Just as it relates to whether or not, in general, we're replacing policies or adding policies, I think I just want clarification on that. And I wonder if we are replacing policies, if we need to say what we're removing or what the exchange is. So it's not, my comment is not really related to this particular policy, but just me learning about how we do this in general, whether we're adding policy or exchanging one policy for another. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Dr. Benitez and then Mr. Wilcox.
So this one in part, this group of policies, I just went back into our current documents, are policies that we need to update, and the last update is in 1995. I purposely allow for everybody to review these policies for over a month. Again, this is everybody's, everybody should be able to feel comfortable with the policies that we approved. So I don't think that we are ready to do that unless there's one or two of these that you are able to approve today, or if you need more time, you may have not thought of it prior to today. I would like to ask you to actually look at the ones that are already posted on the website and compare it to the ones that we submit to you. That's why we give you, especially with these ones, because they are lengthy and very important. We would like for you to take the time to read them and give us feedback prior to coming to the second reading for approval. Again, no judgment. I understand that sometimes we get so involved with other board business that this is not necessary in our minds. And when we finally come to it to approve it, then we might realize that there are some things there that we cannot live with it. So I would, I'm going to recommend that we don't approve any of them unless there's any that you feel comfortable with them. But I'm under the assumption that you have not had the time to review these, and I don't want to push this forward without you having that time to look at them. And they are on the booklet. They would be ones that we are replacing. Some of it is very vague, like Dr. Joyner said. And so you might want to not just do what you had already, but make sure that we update with the recommendations that CABE gave us according to what we should be doing at this time of the year, at this time of history, this historical time. Again, that doesn't mean that you don't want to go back to the should instead of the must. I just want to give you the benefit of more time because these are important ones. I myself would like to see a checklist out of this approval of evaluation of materials. And but that's something that we usually help the district do after we have an approval of the policy. But definitely, these are important ones.
Dr. Benitez, are you saying that you're withdrawing your motion?
I'm saying I'm withdrawing the motion unless there's one of these policies that people can live with, and then I will amend the motion to include only that people are comfortable with. Right now, we are saying that three of the ones up for, well, I don't think people talk about school production, but maybe you didn't have a chance to look at that. But definitely two of them people are not comfortable with, and I don't want to push those through.
Point of order, Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez. Mr. Goldson?
6200B, 6200A and B seems pretty straightforward in regards to adult education. I don't see any problem on that. I don't know if anybody else does. I could be fine with passing that one tonight, voting positively for that one tonight.
What about 6146? That is about mastery testing, which we have to do.
Again, Madam President, I'm not an educational expert, so I would defer to the people on the board who are and have them lead us on that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Goldson. Mr. Wilcox and then Dr. Joyner.
Yeah, I would be happy to vote in support of those two tonight to move those forward. And again, I do apologize, and we'll get my comments on the other one to you all in the next couple days. And then also to answer Dr. Yarborough's question, so using 6200 as an example, if we have a policy that's 6200 right now for adult education, which we probably do because we use our numbering system is the same one that we used to use, is still the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education numbers. So this would supersede an existing policy 6200 because we would be passing a new one that's the same on the same topic with the same number. And the way the numbering system works, it wouldn't be 6200 was on pets in schools or something radically different. It would be on adult education.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Dr. Joyner?
I think this is a teachable moment for all of us. One, it might not be good to try to do too many policies at one time.
Yes.
And it also might be better for us to, in advance, know that some policies may be more controversial than others. And But I would also remind the board that we do have responsibility to read in advance, even though we all have full-time jobs and full-time family responsibilities. I'd also like to have the board understand that there's not a single policy up here that does not have a legal reference. So that, you know, a lot of this is based on case law and precedent, but we probably should, as a process, identify the most controversial ones early on and try to deal with the ones that are not, that are sort of fairly routine. And the two most controversial ones here are student publications, but I think we came to some agreement on that. I hope we did. That's how I understood it. And the other one has to do with school productions, but school productions kind of follows on the heels of the right of students to express themselves freely and so on and so forth. So I think we've done a really good job with that, Dr. Benitez especially. The big issue is instructional materials. And I think that we need to probably get more input on that and try to get language that is clear. And that's all First Amendment stuff. But then there's also those, take into account ethnic differences. I can't stand the N-word. And the biggest violators of it are artists. So some people that are artists and some people who say they're artists. And it is demeaning. And there's a lot of research that talks about how it impacts people's well-being. And there are other words like that too, the F word. And I don't mean the one that has to deal with sexual relationship, but the one that has to deal with demeaning people that are same-sex orientation. So I think we should take that out. And I think we should see whether or not we can live with the ones that were mentioned by Mr. Golson, Dr. Benitez, and Mr. Wilcox.
Right.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Dr. Benitez, I'm thinking the cleaner way to do this is to withdraw your motion, the seconder also withdraw, and then if you want to try and pass the 6200 A and B, which sounds like we have support for, then make a motion to approve those two.
I also understood that the mastery examination had support and it was clear to people.
Yeah, so just in your
Yes,
motion,
so
make
I'm
sure you
withdrawing. I'm
in
withdrawing
your-
my motion to approve all those policies.
is the
I
seconder-
withdraw my motion.
Thank you. And then
No.
go ahead now and state your motion and just detail which ones you're motioning to approve.
Yes. I make a motion to approve 6200 A and B. It's adult education program and requirements for credits in adult education. And policy 6146.2 A and B, which is mastery examination, and B, which is multilingual students and alternate assessments.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Discussion, Dr. Yarborough? You had your hand up from,
Yes, I don't have a discussion on this point. I can
Okay.
make my comment though, if you
okay,
like.
go ahead.
Just my comment is, the committee may be the place for this discussion, but to the point that there are certain policies that may be important, timely, big decisions that we kind of have a walkthrough of any changes or any updates so that myself, especially in the general public, may know what changes are being made, and if there's a historical reference or a legal reference or precedent, that information will be out there. Again, the committee may be the place to do that, but even if there's a way in a board conversation for that short presentation or highlights to be made, it might help to keep me informed and on the same page, as well as our public and community members.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Benitez.
I agree. I think, again, I've heard all of you say that there were many of them. And, you know, I'm very ambitious, and those who know me, I am really ambitious. So, and I thought, you know, giving you more time, but definitely all of these are policies that are from 1995. My daughter was born in 96 and she's 27 years old. And so I figure she definitely is not the same, it's not living in the same world she was born in. So these are things that we do have to change, but this has been a great discussion, and I wish people would come to our committee meetings. That would be great. But definitely, I'm taking into account the recommendation for giving you information on what's the previous policy dating, which will be good. We have like for this one, 6200, we are putting it for the new one. The latest was in 1995, for example. I'll start doing a little bit of that, so that way you guys are more conscious about it and can go back into the book and see it. And the book is published. You can see them all there. Very vague, and some outdated completely with the law. But I don't think that we are I don't think that we are in any way violating the rights of kids or families. So, but I think we need to update.
Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez and Dr. Yarborough. See no further discussion, we'll vote on policies 6200 A and B and 6146.2 A and B. Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Mr. Golson,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox.
Yes.
Ms. Cruz Bustamante,
Yes.
Mr. Musser.
Yes.
Mayor Elicker is not here, and I am a yes as well, and so that item passes. Thank you all. The personnel report, and then let me just, Mr. Wilcox, before we do finance and operations committee, I'm gonna jump to number 8, superintendent's report. It was the presentation that we put on hold at our last meeting. This way the staff that doesn't need to be here the entire time can leave if they need to.
Madam President, point of order.
Mr. Colton?
I noticed that we have the travel, international travel, trip requests. I don't see it on the agenda.
It wasn't an agenda item when I requested agenda item, so we'll see what happens when we get to teaching and learning.
So do they need this done for by this meeting in order for them to be able to travel?
I don't, at the moment, I don't know. I texted Dr. Joyner earlier, but I haven't gotten a response, so we'll see. So we'll move to the personnel report, and then we'll move to the superintendent's report, which includes that presentation. And then we'll see what happens with the list of trips.
You want to move the report?
Sure.
Madam President, I move the superintendent's personnel report.
For a second.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Bolton, Mr. Wilcox, Dr. Negron.
Before recommending approval for the report, I'm asking to amend the report. On page 3, I would like to remove the first item under termination.
Madam President, I amend my motion to approve the personnel report minus the first item under termination. Should we say the name?
You can.
I'm not sure if that's a Mr. or Mrs., but Taylor Howard, pre-K assistant teacher.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote to approve the action items of the personnel report with the exception of Taylor At Howard. Taylor Coward or Howard?
Howard, I think it was.
Okay,
Howard, yes.
okay, thank you. Mr. Golton,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Mr. Musser,
Yes.
Ms. Cruz Bustamante,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well, and so that item passes. Did you have anything on the personnel report that's not on the action item? Okay. And so we can move on to the superintendent's report, the presentation on the path to mathematics.
So thank you for the opportunity to present the presentation that had been prepared for our last meeting. Thank you for moving it up on the agenda so that the staff who's here tonight can present it and hopefully continue on their merry way today. But I've been talking a lot prior to now related to student engagement and literacy. And today I want an opportunity to also lift the work that has been going on in the district as it relates to mathematics. So today with us, we are going to have Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, Ms. Keisha Red-Hannons, along with our Supervisor of Mathematics, Monica Joyner, and our District Mathematics Coach, Courtney Costa, and our iReady PD Specialist, Michael O'Neill, who are going to provide insights into where we are, again, related to mathematics across the district.
Good evening, board. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you this evening. We are excited to talk about mathematics. Many of you know I was a high school math teacher, so this is near and dear to my heart. And I just want to publicly commend our math department for the work that they've been doing over the last 2 years under Supervisor Joyner's leadership. And as she presents, I just ask you to focus in on the leadership moves, the intentionality, the purpose as to why she does what she does, and the team do what they do every day. And I also would like to commend our iReady specialist. iReady is our math curriculum program. And Michael has joined us as part of the team. He's on our academic team walkthroughs with us. He's also providing feedback to our principals and teachers through data chat. You'll hear that during the presentation. And I just want to shout out Courtney Costa, our district coach. She had to leave for a family engagement, but she was here to present earlier. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Joyner.
Thank you, Ms. Hannons. Good evening, everyone. So as you all know, last year was my first year in this role. So I want to kind of give a brief synopsis. I'm not going to introduce Michael yet. I'm going to let him introduce himself when he joins in the conversation. It's just a brief synopsis of the things that we've done, that we did last year. Last year was year 2 of our iReady implementation, K-5. We also used last year to pilot 2 different programs for 6th through 8th grade. And with feedback from parents, from students, from teachers, from staff members, we made the decision to go with iReady 6 through 8 as well, so that we have that consistency in K through 8. We created new pacing guides. One of my biggest things is collaboration and feedback, because we can make decisions from where we are, but our teachers are the practitioners and our students are the recipients of that practice. So we reach out quite often to get feedback from our teachers, to get feedback from students, and we take that into consideration when we make the decisions that we make. So we've created morning meeting slides, and what that does is it sets our students up for what's to come. We know that literacy is huge in the district, huge in the nation, huge in the state. And sometimes we have to find ways to sneak math in whenever we can. I'm very much a person
who believes that literacy belongs everywhere. So we speak about literacy and vocabulary and word walls and things like that within our mathematics curriculum as well. But one of our ways to get math in front of our children more often is through their morning meetings, where we introduce concepts that they are then able to grapple with, think about before they actually learn about them. And the feedback that we got from the teachers who used that with fidelity last year was that it made their instruction so much easier because our students didn't come in, they came in with some background knowledge as opposed to coming in clean and not knowing as much. So that has been helpful, and we've increased the usage of that because teachers talking to teachers, they have spoken about it enough to their peers that their peers are all using it. And now when we walk into classrooms, we see those morning meeting slides used regularly. We've begun to build a library, a video library of exemplary lessons. We believe that a lot of the talent that we need is in our space. So as we go about, last year we started doing collaborative coach walkthroughs. So we would get together in teams of coaches and go to different schools and cohorts to see what was going on so that coaches could then take what they saw and not feel as though they were alone in their own building to come up with solutions for different things. Going out to other buildings, seeing things, seeing that some of the same issues were present, and then seeing how those issues were being mitigated gave them ideas for how to bring that back to their own schools. And in doing that, we found some exemplary teachers who opened up their classrooms to Courtney and Jessica last year at the time to go in and videotape. Because we know that when we go to trainings, professional development, we'll often see videos of someone in Idaho or Michigan or somewhere teaching their students. And some of our teachers are of the mindset, well, those aren't our kids. So now we're creating videos of our kids and our teachers to share that with them, to get ideas, because we have some great stuff going on in a lot of our classrooms. We implemented, last year was the first year of a new Envisions curriculum in the high school. So our high school teams, we've had teams of teachers working on pacing guides for the high school, working on building common formative assessments at the high school so that we can then have conversations across the schools. I'm trying to build, one of my colleagues said, we don't want to be a system of schools, we want to be a school system. And in order to do that, we need to build that cohesiveness and collaborate across all of our schools. So that's what we're doing. And I think people are being quite receptive to it, and it's working pretty well. So that's essentially what has gone on, what went on last year. If you go to the next slide. You can see that there was, the blue was the previous year, the red was last year. So in terms of our SBAC scores, there was an increase everywhere with the exception of 8th grade, which essentially stayed the same. So 8th grade went from 10.9 to 10.5, where as a math person, you know that if you round, they both round to 11. So 8th grade stayed the same. And all of our other tested areas went up. And as a district, we went up. Some people may say, well, 2%, it doesn't matter. It's growth. You know, growth. And as long as we stay on the trajectory we're on, our students will continue to grow. And we'll start to see more and more numbers that we really want to see. Next slide, please. So what we have done, a brief overview of what our team has done right now this year. We've engaged in several different activities to gather information. That's what we want to do. We need to gather information, support instruction, and plan our professional learning experiences. And the way we've gathered that information, our goals from doing that is to gather information about the actual instruction. What is happening? What is happening in our classrooms? We want to understand how we can serve teachers through professional learning. Asking teachers, what do you need? Where's your self-efficacy struggling? Like, what is it that you need? And providing those things. And making database decisions based on everything that we've seen in order to deploy our resources. And Michael is a part of that deployment. So some of the things we've done, this is one of the pieces that Courtney would have spoken to, but Keisha mentioned we've had our academic team walkthroughs. We've gone to all the schools. Dr. Negron did her walkthroughs at all 41 schools. The academic team did walkthroughs at all 41 schools. The math department was not necessarily part of all 41 schools, but this second quarter, we're going to get to the schools that we weren't a part of the first time. So to make sure we get to all of them. So we visited various classrooms at each school. We collaborated with our math coaches and the leadership team to debrief with about what was actually happening. Michael, who's our iReady consultant, was usually with us on those walkthroughs, as well as Courtney Costa, who is my district K-5 coach, and providing feedback, timely feedback and next steps to our building leaders.
Thank you, everybody. Dr. Negron and Board of Education members, really appreciate being here. My name is Michael O'Neill. I'm the district's dedicated professional learning specialist from iReady. So over the past 2 years, I've supported districts all over the region and country, both with their implementation of iReady and iReady Classroom Math, which is the district's core math program. I am very excited to spend each and every day here with the New Haven Public Schools, learning about what your needs are and finding ways that we can support principals, teachers, coaches, and ultimately the students here in New Haven. Over the past several weeks, I've had the opportunity to meet with every school-based leadership team, everybody who's involved in math instruction in the schools through what we call a data chat. So during these data chats, we've taken a look at schools' performance on the first diagnostic, which revealed some good information about where areas of strength are and where areas of growth are. We've taken a look not only how students perform, but under what conditions they took the diagnostic. So for example, did any students rush through the diagnostic? Were there any conditions that we need to shift for the administration of the second and third diagnostic? And what was the overall feel from both teachers and students after the administration of the first diagnostic? We also took a look in depth about students' MyPath completion and performance data. For those of you who don't know, MyPath is iReady's digital suite of lessons that are given to students based on their performance on the diagnostic that are meant to complement the existing teacher-led instruction in the classroom. We strongly believe that no computer program will ever replace high-quality teachers. We look to supplement what teachers in New Haven are doing, not supplant what teachers are doing in New Haven. And based on these data chats, we're able to set individual priorities and both for instruction and support. But the most important thing we've been doing on our round of data chats is listening to what principals, coaches, and teachers need in the building. We're very much committed to providing a differentiated professional learning experience for each school and ultimately each teacher. And we've heard some great feedback about how things are going and what shifts we can make and which activities we can continue and do in greater detail. Also, as a math department, we've taken the opportunity to look at and really synthesize that data from the first diagnostic. We also took a look at how iReady Classroom Mathematics, which is the district's core math program, is being implemented, and largely that vehicle has been through the academic team walkthroughs. And then with the math department and with each individual building principal and math coach, we're setting priorities for what are their goals for math instruction this year, and how can we support them as a professional learning community in the district.
So one piece about the professional learning, as I mentioned before, with the focus on literacy, there are some grade levels. If the classroom, if the teacher is not a departmentalized teacher, meaning dedicated specifically to math, most of their professional development goes towards literacy. So we have put in place optional PD for teachers who don't necessarily get to come to our CIA meetings or our half-day staff developments because they're dedicated in another place. We have optional PD sessions for them to come to get the things that they may have missed during that time. And one of the things that's fantastic about that is that the teachers have been asking for it. So the first one we did was October 30th, and I believe about 105 teachers came to that one. A number of our principals have opened up the opportunity for their teachers to come to that, our optional training, in lieu of one of their staff meetings. So partnership with principals, with teachers, trying to make sure that teachers get everything that they need. And another PD move that was put in place is our kindergarten and first grade teachers. There were some changes within iReady for kindergarten and first grade. And one of my deep embedded beliefs, I'm a former high school math person as well. One of my deep beliefs is that we have to strengthen the education, the math learning of our children at the lowest levels as they grow up, so that we can then send stronger math students to high school. So that being the case, we have to make sure that we give special attention to our kindergarten and first grade teachers. So we set up 2 days where the teachers were able to come out for a half day each of professional learning, and our math coaches served as substitutes in the classroom so that the teachers could come out and receive that professional development. So we're trying all the different ways we can think of to be able to get professional development to our teachers without a heavy lift on the schools themselves. So our theory of action, sorry, I hadn't gotten to that. Our theory of action is greater consistency and implementation of high leverage instructional practices will advance student learning, and consistency will be achieved through multi-pronged supports for teachers, coaches, and leaders. Some of the things, if you look in the center, these are the data sources that were used to come up with these conclusions. Some of our observations are that some teachers are implementing high quality instructional practices as described in the iReady curriculum classroom. Some schools are effectively implementing iReady personalized instruction, which is my path. Teachers new to iReady are experiencing a predictable pattern of implementation. They're experiencing the same things that those teachers who were new to iReady 2 years ago that they experienced. And because we're able to see the growth that those teachers have had, we can predict how these teachers are going to grow, and probably even more because we have Michael with us to give them more intensive, differentiated professional development. And we've observed that classroom teachers and support staff need continued training and resources to provide specialized instruction. So we've been, in terms of that particular one, we've been in conversations with Tiffany Jackson from our SPED department to work on getting specific PD for our SPED teachers and our paras as well, so that they can be even more of a support for our students. And also multilingual. High-level observations. Math department is committed to building sustainable capacity. Michael is not going to be with us forever, maybe. So we have to be sure that our building leaders, our coaches, and our teachers are able to carry on all of the lessons, all of the things that he has shared with us and that he has taught them, so that we can continue to share that information as new teachers come in, as new leadership comes in. We want to create greater consistency in our instructional practices. And part of the way to get to that is through our video libraries, and also getting teachers to be able to go into classrooms and see some teachers in action. For example, I'm not going to say the schools, but we were at one particular school and there was a second grade teacher who was struggling a little bit with the small group instruction and with getting students to share their strategies. A few days later, we went to another school that had a teacher who had that down pat. She was amazing at it. So we set it up so that this one teacher could go visit that teacher, and that teacher was very much open to her coming into her classroom and then being able to collaborate with her and be somewhat of a mentor for her. So we're trying to build these cohorts across the district so that people don't feel like they're in isolation with things, that they can talk with their peers. And we're also supporting leaders and teachers with high quality professional learning.
Based on the information we gathered through academic team walkthroughs, meetings with teachers and building leaders, we put together a plan that I think is going to support the professional learning needs of teachers. And a very important part of this plan is really hearing the voice of classroom teachers. I was a classroom teacher. I was a building leader. I'm also happen to be married to a classroom teacher. So I hear the real deal on what professional learning should look like on a routine basis. So we've undertaken a schedule of professional learning days that are facilitated by my colleagues at Curriculum Associates. So they come to New Haven before school and some of the early school release days, we had sort of full group professional learning. Again, that was differentiated based on teachers' experience with the program and a variety of other different factors. We also have, as Ms. Joyner mentioned earlier, some professional learning opportunities are facilitated by the coaches. And my personal belief is the closer you get to the classroom, the more meaningful those days are going to be. So our instructional coaches in the buildings are very close to the classrooms every single day. And those professional experiences are very much job embedded. So that involves coaches sitting down with teachers, engaging in instructional planning, going into classrooms, co-teaching lessons with them, and then debriefing afterwards. I think those high touch, very intensive experiences are really what help turn the corner with a lot of teachers to build and sustain their professional growth. As Ms. Joyner mentioned earlier, we are engaging in some highly specialized professional learning. So we know that and we're very happy to support a variety of different languages spoken across our schools. We want to honor that by providing support specific to teachers of multi-language learners. As a former special education administrator, I also know it's very important that our special education teachers and students have unique needs, the way that they use iReady and iReady Classroom Mathematics. So we've already started meeting with those groups of educators at schools and really have listened to them about how they can use the program and best practices that we can share across the district. And then finally, we're looking to ways to support our in-district tutors that we currently have, and also looking at opportunities to support summer learning across the district. And not incidentally, our learners this past summer, actually, there was less learning loss in most grades across New Haven than there was that we saw nationally. So kudos to our students and families for coming back to the school year strong. And we want to make sure that summer learning is taking place and provide teachers, families, and students the tools that they need to be successful next summer, which really the planning for that, as you can imagine, has already started.
One thing I just wanted to point out about the PD that our coaches facilitate. Not only is there, in their building facilitation, but on our CIA days, the coaches in teams work with their cohort of schools. So especially when we're talking about the middle school, most middle schools, you may have one 5-6 teacher and one 7-8 teacher. So imagine being in a building and you're the only one. You don't have someone else that you can collaborate with and talk with in that space, which is why we have built cohorts of schools so that now you have a team of people that are teaching the same subject, the same grade level, so that when we get together for CIA meetings, our coaches are delivering PD from the same. We create differentiated professional development PowerPoints. So our levels are like a beginner's level, a mid-level, and then an advanced level. So like, what is it that you need? And we separate our teachers into the levels that they best fit with. And now you have that targeted specific time that you can work together with a team of coaches, but you also now have people that you can connect with on your own. When you're planning, you can reach out, you can share emails, you can share resources, you can share strategies, so that it's not you working by yourself in those spaces. In our bi-monthly coaches meetings, our coaches, actually, Michael, you can speak to this one
I'd be
too.
happy to.
Yeah.
So I've had the opportunity to work with the coaches as part of their bi-monthly coach meetings, really building their content knowledge about Ready Classroom Math, helping them support teachers, because their primary role as instructional coaches is to help teachers develop their skills, and giving them effective tools that have been vetted by us for teachers across the country for providing feedback and next steps to teachers. With our building leaders, as a former building leader, I know that effective building leadership can rapidly drive implementation and high quality instruction in the building. So we're helping them, again, same as coaches, build their knowledge of the program, what they should be looking for when they visit classrooms. And we want them to understand what the proven best practices are when we're looking at our growth goals and their role in iReady Classroom Math implementation. And across both groups, we are definitely recognizing the the need to support our teachers of multi-language learners and our multi-language learners in our classrooms every day. And some of the feedback I receive from both teachers and coaches in New Haven is that the program is largely based on language, and there's a strong academic discourse component of the program. The program does have some built-in supports for students who are learning English and their teachers, but we also want to make sure that we rely on what the teachers know about their students, both their language backgrounds, their cultural backgrounds, and their family backgrounds. So we're teaching the teachers the strategies, but we're also teaching the teachers to be good consumers of those strategies, because it's ultimately their decisions that drive what students learn. And we want to make sure that they are empowered with a decision-making process and not necessarily empowered with the script, which teachers don't need. Our teachers know their students very well, and we want to acknowledge that knowledge of their students, but we have a variety of tools that teachers can choose from to the best of their ability in their classes with their students.
All right, and our last piece of information is essentially about the extended support for our priority schools. We have 4 priority schools for whom we are contracting for a specific embedded partner to go into each of those schools 1 day a week. One of the schools had already written into their SIG that they were going to hire that person. So we were able to identify what is the next level, like what is the next school in line, so to speak, in terms of needing that support. So we have that person who comes in once a week to each of their schools to focus on instructional planning, co-teaching, and reflecting. And then the last piece is, as I'm sure everyone has heard, we did receive the high dosage tutoring grant from the state. So we are in the process now of getting that up and running. We've identified 10 schools that we're going to be able to have tutors come in and provide specific support for those particular students in small group focus sessions in grades 6 through 8. We're scheduling that to be different waves, like 7 to 8 week waves, that we'll get a group of students in. Once those students get up and running, get going, then the next wave will make the determination, are there any of those students who need to continue, or are we going to bring other students in? So that will determine how many students we're able to serve throughout the year. So thank you so very much for your time and for your continued support. Any questions?
Thank you, Madam President. I think we should also put on the record that Ms. Mayor Elicker joined the meeting. But I have some questions and some comments with the presentation. First of all, I want to thank the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and the director of the math department for this presentation. The time that you put into it, it's fairly easy to understand for novices like me. But I have a couple of questions and I have a couple of comments. My first question is, how many math teacher vacancies do we have in the system? Because one of the things that we discussed is how important it is to the growth of the students to have these teachers. They know their students and so on. How many classes don't even have teachers? Do we have that number available, or?
Ms. Flagler, do you happen to know how many specific math vacancies we have? So every classroom has a teacher. There are some that have 6.
6 out of how many? How many total positions do we have in math? And when we say 6, I mean, when we're talking about, for instance, high school, that doesn't mean one classroom. That could mean 4 or 5 classrooms of students, right? It could be up to 100 kids who are not having a certified teacher in their class. Is that correct?
It could, yes.
Maybe you don't have the information now, but if you could provide
So
the
there- yeah,
information in
six
future
teacher vacancies
presentations.
across 40 schools, 41 schools? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My other question was comments was about the under the district SBA scores, it says percentage of students at levels 3 and 4. Could you define that for me? I don't understand that.
So the way the SBAC scores go, the reason we just put 3 and 4, because those are the ones that score proficient or better.
Proficient or better?
Yes.
Okay.
2 and 1 are the ones that are below proficient.
Okay. So, and we don't have, I would have liked to have seen pre-pandemic scores to see how the scores, how student learning was affected by the pandemic. You know, it went down, that was coming back up, that would have been helpful. Because there's two ways to read, to tell this story, right? One way is to say, great, we had an increase over a year after the pandemic, a percentage of 2 to 3%, and so some of these different grades. But the other way to tell this story is that for grade, what is this?
The last one is the
Well, for the
district.
district, for the district, 87% of the children are not proficient, right?
We want to focus on the negative, yes.
I don't want to focus on the negative. I want to focus on the kids that need the work the most. And unfortunately, though there are a lot of children that need additional work. So it would have been helpful to know what it was before the pandemic. It would be helpful to know how many classrooms don't have teachers, because, and I would have loved to have seen a comparison, not just by grades, but by classrooms, right? Those classrooms, if we were able to break it down to the classrooms that don't have teachers, certified teachers, we did have an argument when we go to our funders to say, we need more money to attract more teachers, because when we don't have teachers in the class, children are having a hard time learning. So I'm not trying to highlight the negative. I'm trying to say, let's use the negative to our advantage by showing the folks that pay for our systems, that fund us, that we need more in order to accomplish the goals. So I would have loved to have seen a breakdown by school, and maybe even a breakdown by class, and some description about how those classrooms that don't have teachers, how they're affected when it comes to the SBA scores. One other thing that I would like to see is math instruction is not done in a vacuum, right? I mean, you know, families are just as responsible for their children learning as we are as a school system. So I don't know if you guys have done this, and this is just a suggestion from somebody this is my last in-person board meeting. So it's a suggestion for someone who's walking out the door. But if we could provide some sort of guidebook for parents that kind of gives them an idea of how they can incorporate math at home. I mean, I'm talking about some parents who may not have graduated from high school, you know, or some parents that don't have a great educational experience. Some sort of simple guidebook. I mean, when my daughter was younger, when she was little, when I walked upstairs, I counted. So she got used to that rhythm, you know, that kind of stuff. And if we could provide some sort of guidebook for our parents on how they can help with their children's learning, just not them in court, but also providing resources for them where they could bring their kids to get additional help, so on. I think that would be helpful.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
So thank you so very much for bringing that up, because that's, there's so much that's going on that we don't always remember to put everything here. So one of the things that we do have is we have a family newsletter that goes home with every unit of instruction. And in the newsletter, it says, it starts with, on one side, it has I can statements so that the parents can see what the students are going to be able to do at the end of that unit. Then it has different things that they're going to be working on in the classroom. And it has like, it'll have on the front either a song or a link to a video on YouTube that they can use at home to help them with that. Then when you flip on the back, it has, these are some things that you can do with your child at home for these particular things, and also links to other resources to support those things. So that goes home with every unit. So
And when we,
That goes home,
just
that goes home. How?
with the students.
In their book bags.
So and like when we did we went to the annual the Title I annual meeting, and when we met with families, we gave them samples of the newsletter so that they know this is something to ask for. We've had some parents come up to us unsolicited and say, thank you for these newsletters that are going home. So that is something where it's a work in progress as well.
So please don't take my comments as a negative or as a shot at anything that you guys are doing. It's just a, I'm hoping helpful guidance, helpful assistance. And I'm not trying to be negative, but at the end of the day, you know, people are gonna look at those numbers and they're gonna say, oh my God, only 87% of only 13% of our kids are proficient, and they're going to see something negative in that. And we have to explain the entire story, you know, why we're there. And we're not there because of something that we're not doing. We're there because of other things that are not happening also. Thank you for your indulgence. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson. Dr. Nadeau, do you want to?
Yes, I just wanted to add, Mr. Golson, first, thank you for the suggestions. And I just wanted to assure you that in the conversations that I've been leading with building leaders, a lot of the conversations are always looking at the data as to where we are now, comparing to where we were last year, but also taking them back all the way to pre-COVID. So that, because I want everybody to see, as I continue to speak about our next chapter of excellence, I am kind of raising it to that level. How can we get to where we were pre-pandemic? Because we know a lot has happened since the pandemic, but I do, for one, appreciate all the suggestions that you made in reference to the way that we are showing the data tonight as it relates to mathematics. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Negron. To the board members, really quick, to the board members that are in person, if you want to speak and want to be recognized, I just realized this because I can see all of the seats. When you turn on your mics, I can see that people are waiting to speak and the order. So just turn on your mic and I will call on you. Dr. Yarborough and then Dr. Benitez.
Thank you. Briefly, I want to just thank you for the presentation. I found it to be very clear, the information to be kind of accurately presented. And I appreciate Ms. Red-Hannon's kind of at the beginning pointing our attention and focus to leadership moves, I think you might have said, or leadership strategies for how you're seeing the data, responding to it, and then supporting the teachers and our learners in moving forward. So just a quick thank you just for the clarity, the ease of presentation, to be able to read beforehand and follow along. And I look forward to seeing the advancements that are made and, you know, us continuing to strengthen the district, particularly in mathematics. So thank you for that. And also just one comment, because I keep looking at the finances, and I appreciate the note about continuing to strengthen our in-district capacity to provide some of the support, the coaching, and the ongoing development. And even, you know, connecting teachers across schools to be able to learn from each other, as well as continuing to help teachers to learn from our consultants and trainers as they move forward in this particular iReady curriculum. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Dr. Benitez?
Yes, I pretty much want to say what Dr. Yarborough said. I am very happy to hear that we're using formative assessment to discuss things with teachers. and to support teachers with strategies that support those gaps that you find in the data. That is, I mean, it was beautiful to hear your presentation today. I want to ask, how many, does every school have a math coach? I'm assuming only K-8 schools have math coaches. And does every school that is a K-8 have a math coach?
Every school that is a K-8 has a math coach, yes. There were some vacancies that we were able to fill, and so those vacancies are filled. And we have, for example, one teacher who's out on FMLA, one coach who's out on FMLA, so our district coach is there at least once a week for the day to support that.
Great. And I did not hear what's the support. I think it's the cohort schools that will cover the support of the 7-8 teachers if necessary. And I'm assuming also in the high school, you've created cohorts too, if you could clarify that.
So in terms of 7-8, those cohorts are working together, and we actually had a particular school that had a specific need. So Courtney, Michael, and myself went over to meet with those 7-8 teachers to address that specific need. And then once we got to the bottom of what the need was, Michael was able to go back and support them in that space. With the high schools, we have lead teachers at the high schools. So when we have our district half days and we break off into kind of workshop sessions, then I'm able to meet with the lead teachers at the high schools. And I've opened for them to invite me to their school-based meetings. So we put that on my calendar, and then I can go out to those schools and meet with those teachers. In fact, I have one coming up tomorrow, meeting with co-op.
Okay, well, thank you. I also, I something you mentioned was CIAs, and it might have escaped the public, and I might need that clarification. You are using formative data, or the data as you are teaching kids, and they are engaging with iReady that will give you information about how they are growing on a regular basis. You're using that for when you meet with teachers in order to help them bridge gaps in what student performance is that what I understood, that you have cycles of data and discussion for improvement?
So the cycles of data and discussion for improvement are mostly at the school level. During the CIAs, based on the data that comes from those cycles, we identify what are the high needs areas across the schools based on that data. And then that's how we determine what the professional development is going to happen at the CIAs. That's basically for the K-8s. At the high school, we have, fortunately, we have a great group of teachers who are leading some of the work that we're doing at the high school. They present on a national level, and they're able to do some things with our high school teachers. And we have working groups to work on things such as starting the discussion about having some type of systemic grading policy across the high schools. So they're starting that discussion. We're looking at different pathways at the high school level, non-traditional pathways. So everyone is not going to take calculus. So what are the things that we might need to put in place for our students who are not necessarily going on that path? And in conversation with like some of our teachers from Riverside, for example, our alternative education, to try to look at what can we do at the high school level so that we provide those things for kids there so that they don't have to become alternative. Like, what is it that we can provide in our tier one, so to speak, schools. And we're also doing a book study across the high schools, actually across all of our departmentalized teachers on building thinking classrooms in mathematics.
Very good. Thank you very much. I want to congratulate you also on having leaders engage in the look force and being very much aware of what is it that needs to happen in order for the implementation of iReady to be a consistent implementation. So thank you very much. And I'm really impressed. I'm hoping to see more and more growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Benitez. Dr. Joyner?
Okay, I'm timing myself. I want to make some comments that really have given me a great deal of optimism. I think it started with Dr. Mayo, and then Dr. Tracy went as far as she could, and Dr. Negron was in the middle of all that. So she's really taken it, as the kids say, to the next level through her staff. I see evidence of our becoming a learning organization. And a learning organization, there are no isolated workers. And so what you learn at Cross, at Hillhouse, at Troop, and all these schools is being transmitted throughout the system, the best practices. So that's the medical model. The other thing that I'm seeing is systems thinking, and that is, how do we execute best practices across the system? And how do we become a system problem solvers? Because in any organization, you have people that create problems, you have people that solve problems. And the people that solve problems have to solve the problems that the people in the system created in many cases, self-inflicted wounds. And you model all of this in your presentation. And you made oblique references to mastery learning when you talked about formative and summative assessment. That goes to the point that Mr. Golson made about context. There's so many things that happen outside of the school that influence everything that happens in the school. And we have no control over that. The best we can do is help parents understand what their duties are, and to help students as they mature understand what their duties and responsibilities are. But context is critical, and we're working on getting data that will give us a sense of our students' entry-level characteristics when they come into the system. Everybody does not come in the system as proficient. If we have an issue of poverty and language challenges, then that compounds everything that we do. And we do it quite well, quite frankly, when you consider what we're up against. I think what our board needs to do, and I saw this beginning to happen tonight, is that we need to come to some consensus about what we want the data template to look like that's presented to us. So that all those questions that we ask in the meeting can be answered in advance in a preemptive way when the board says, here's what I need to know in a data presentation about this. Here's what I need. We need to develop templates. And we're working on that in TNL. And that also has to become a policy issue. The other thing that was referenced was correlation studies. There's a direct correlation between a kid that comes to school every day and that kid's achievement, and a kid who rarely comes to school and that kid's achievement. We all know that. It's like medicine. If you don't go to the doctor, you can't be cured. And we need to be very clear about what we do well and what we need from the community and from the students in order for them to do well. The other good part about this is the recognition that literacy is an issue in every content area, because vocabulary unlocks every content area door. And the fact that mathematics is also blending word study into its curriculum and teaching is really great. And that should happen across all content areas. And then, of course, the two last things. Sometimes in order to go fast, you have to go slow. And as Dr. Benitez pointed out, some of our policies are 28 years old. And we're going to have to slow down a little bit to make sure we bring everything up to speed and do what Dr. Yarbrough said about that. And it's the same thing in the content areas. And I think math is doing a good job of that. And then the last two things, high dosage learning is a new term. And that's exactly what, Mr. Golson, these kids that come in way behind will need over the course of their education in the system in order to catch up to high levels of performance. They have to have more opportunities, more time, more instruction, And I gather that the math department is also working on academies and stuff like that for the children that, and we didn't get enough money in that grant, by the way. And then the last thing, just for all of us, we have to maintain our rosters. We cannot lose the good people that are on this team and the previous teams that have presented to us, because we're going to end up like the New York Giants or some of these other teams that are not performing those sports wise. Because you have to have a roster, and you have to develop stars, and you have to keep them. And I heard a lot of stars tonight, and I heard a lot of stars in the last presentation. And that's our responsibility as a board, to make sure that we create an environment where our best people want to stay with us, and where people who don't bind to what we want to do don't think it's comfortable enough for them to stay with us, because we want everybody to perform at their best level. So thank you very much for a very professional and creative presentation. The whole team, from the superintendent to the assistant curriculum supervisor, as well as the board, for the way in which the board responded to and has been responding to this stuff. Thanks a lot.
I'll make one comment.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Yes. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to make one final comment as I was thinking about all that I was said. First of all, thank you so much to everyone for your advice, for your input that will help us become better. And I just wanted to point out that one of the way I think about things is to accentuate the positive. When I was a middle school student, my mom put together a whole seminar, like a workshop and the title of it was Accentuate the Positive. And that stuck with me from that moment. And as a teacher, as a leader, I feel like my role, my job is to accentuate the positive, because that's what keeps people moving. So however small that positive may be, the data is the data. What I walked into, what we came into, it's not the best, right? But we can say that because of the things that we have done and continue to do, we've had some positive movement. And I believe with our children, we start with what is the place that they see some success. So instead of focusing on the area that they're most efficient in, let's start with the space that they see some success. Because once they can see that they can be successful, then we gradually get to the parts where they're most efficient, because they've already built up an attitude and a spirit and an experience of success. So they start to believe, I can be successful in this as well. And I think we all should work that way with our teachers, with our parents, with our students. So that's why I'm really a proponent of accentuating the positive. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. What question? Mr. Wilcox and then Mr. Goldson.
I'll be very brief. A lot of good comments tonight. And is also a lot of good comments from the board. I've learned a lot from that, but also learned a lot from the presentation. So thank you very much for making that. I like accentuating the positive. And just two brief little things. One thing I am noticing is that in the lower grades, because I'm assuming math knowledge is cumulative over time. And so it is particularly good to see that there is, the red bars are higher in the earlier grades, which leads me to think that we might start to see this recursing through the years as those folks move through, which is not to say that it's not an issue that the folks that represented in the higher grades, that there's not work that has to happen there that I know is happening. So glad to hear that. I did want to just add to one point from my colleague, Mr. Goldson, is that this is great. A lot of this is funded by the extra funding we received through the ESSER dollars to purchase the new curriculum, to pay for the consultants services and the training services and all that's added on, that's training the teachers so it can be more self-sustaining moving forward. In fact, we have an agreement on here tonight to continue that relationship. And I just, this shows that when, in this case, the federal government or when the state invests in the schools, good things can happen. And I just have been thinking often about Staples High School, apparently the second best high school in Connecticut based on US News and World Report, down in Westport, similar size to Cross, and based on the Connecticut Department of Education's school report cards, they're able to afford to have 50 more staff members, teachers, paras, so on, in that school. And they're also, I'm guessing that school's not dealing with the effects of systemic racism, poverty, et cetera. And just think what we could do if we were more equitably funded in all our schools across Connecticut to meet those needs. So hopefully we've had good success making those cases, and we're starting to be able to prove successes based on the investments that we've already have received. And hopefully this is a basis to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Mr. Golson?
Thank you, Madam President. First, I'd like to comment that I take it as a personal affront when someone says something negative about the Hill House High School football team or the New York Giants. So I just want to make sure we don't hear that again in this room. Thank you, Madam President. I want to thank both Dr. Joyner and Mr. Wilcox for their comments. I also would like to put this on the record, just because yes, it's important to accentuate the positive, but it's also as important not to ignore the negative or what is perceived as negative. There is a whole movement in this country now around trying to eliminate history or even current events that some people feel is not positive, that doesn't accentuate the positive, like talking about I'm sorry, I could never. Okay,
LGBTQ.
Okay, I'm gonna learn that one day, I swear. About ignoring that community. There's a movement to ignore the negative effects of slavery in this country, even making suggestions that this was a positive that came out of it. So it's important for us to not join that movement. And when we ignore the facts, we are joining that movement. So it's important for us to say, yes, there is some positive that has happened over the last couple of years, and that is a good thing. But yes, there is still some negative out there, and we got to figure out why it's there and figure out how to address it. And we don't have to take full responsibility for it, quite frankly, because as I said earlier, education doesn't happen in a vacuum. And this responsibility falls on families, it falls on the community, and it falls on our funders. And the people that say money shouldn't really make a difference in education are the people that have money. They're the ones that say it shouldn't make a difference. If their 50 extra funding for 50 extra teachers doesn't make a difference to how their children learn, then give it to us. And we'll show you how it makes a difference here. So I don't want to walk away from this meeting today with anyone feeling that having a conversation about the not so pretty things is a negative conversation, because it's not. And we can't move forward if we don't have those conversations. Thank you, Madam President, except when you're talking about the Hill House football team or the New York Giants. Don't ever mention the Patriots in this room.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. Dr. Yarborough?
Yes, thank you. Just a question about the high dosage tutoring. To what degree are we leveraging area college students or high school students who are doing well in math to come into our lower grades to help with tutoring and support? I know some students actually, I think they have to be trained now to tutor in certain subjects. Can we do more of that? Or to what degree are we doing it now? Thank you.
So good evening once again. Just recently, just recently at the past board meeting, the board passed for us to partner with Teach for America and the Ignite Fellowship. The Ignite Fellowship utilizes all college students that are trained. They're trained, the students are from a national network, if you will. of colleges and universities, and they're working directly with our students. It has been an amazing experience for our students to be able to see students on college campuses, working with them day in, day out. We will eventually bring forward some more information on the Ignite Fellowship, but I can tell you it is inspiring for our students to engage with the college students. The first 2 to 3 minutes of the session is all focused on SEL and building relationships. And so to see our students engaging with the college students, it is virtual, has been very rewarding.
Thank you. And are we having any traction of kind of compounding that success with local area college students or even high school students to reach back to the lower classrooms?
So we just started the program with Ignite, but it is something we're looking towards. I know in conversations that Dr. Negron has had with our liaison from Teach for America, as well as me, we're looking at this cohort of tutors to possibly come and teach in New Haven public schools after they matriculate out through college. So we're definitely looking at tapping into them. You also are aware of the tutoring initiative by the city as well. So any students that we could bring in to work with our youth, we definitely will do. We also have mentors from the universities working with our students on science fair projects as well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Okay, thank you for the presentation. Okay, we'll move on to finance and operations report. Mr. Wilcox.
All right.
Action items.
Thank you very much. Before I ask if anybody has anything they'd like to be moved separately, I just wanted to mention 2 things briefly. One is an interesting tidbit of information. If you're thinking the lists of agreements, abstracts, et cetera, has been quite long lately, I can attest to you that they are quite long based on the length of the Finance and Operations Committee meetings. But Ms. Pat DeMayo did let me know that last fiscal year, so for the entire year in Finance and Operations, we had 637 items come through that committee. As of now, this year, we have already had 675 items come through that committee. A lot of the extra agreements, contracts, whatever, is things that are funded through ESSER funds and so on. So that's if you're thinking, geez, there's an awful lot of these. Yes, there are. And having read every single one of those, it adds up. So, and the other thing I did just want to highlight that gets lost in long lists of, there is listed on here is also the contract to hire the architect to design the renovation of the space for our adult education program. So I think that's a great thing to highlight, that things are moving forward. The funds have been freed up from the state to be able to move forward with that. And so, yeah, that recommendation's coming from the Citywide Building and Stewardship Committee through FNO with a committee that includes the principal and Michelle Bonanno, Giovanni Zinn, and Mr. Lamb. So it's that group is bringing that forward. So I think that's great to have progress on that front. Did just want to highlight that because that's we don't have often building design stuff come through here. So is there anything that needs to be moved separately? All right. Hearing and seeing nothing, so I'm going to go ahead and make the motion, and that is I move that we approve the 2 abstracts, the 29 agreements, the 9 purchase orders, the 10 contracts, and the 2 change orders as recommended by the Finance and Operations Committee and as listed on your agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox and Dr. Yarborough. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the FNO items. Mr. Wilcox?
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
Dr. Joyner?
Yes.
Dr. Benitez?
Yes.
Mr. Golton?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz Bustamante?
Yes.
Mr. Musser?
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well, and so those items pass. And we'll move on to the students' report. It's up to you. You wanna- next thing?
Good evening. My name is Harmony. I'm the senior student representative to the Board of Education. Here with John Carlos, the junior student representative. Today we're here to present kind of a quick update on what we're doing. We know it's late. Y'all got things to do. I want to sleep. If we could start with the first slide. So what was included in the packets for Board of Education members, and if you would like to see a copy, please feel free to see me, is something called the Hope and Victory Directives. These are a list of demands that we created last year with all of the high school student councils, and they kind of serve as a 2 to 5 year plan for how student leadership and student power will move for the next 2 to 5 years. And they particularly focus on 3 things: academics and curricula, student leadership and creating student structures of power, and yes, and better facilities. So first I want to walk you through the process of how this was created. Oh yeah, slideshow. Yeah, I got you. Thank you. Then the next one. So we first started off with asking the age-old question that comes up over and over and over and over again at citywide student councils. What does a better school system look like to you? There were around 50 students there from almost all high schools, and we gave them a worksheet. They conferred within their small groups. They wrote stuff into the worksheet. They were asked, what does this school within your reach look like, and what labor and resources are needed to make this happen? This took place in the December 2022 and January 2023 meeting. Next one. Then came the hard part. We sorted through and synthesized over 400 student inputs for what they responded. We created different buckets, like how do we create safer schools? How do we create more engaging schools, et cetera, et cetera. And then we created a committee. The committee involved high school students, activists that are prominent in New Haven, union workers, and intellectuals who specialize in school systems. This took place from January to May of 2023. Then we brought it to the, I believe it was April or May, Citywide Student Council meeting in 2023. We gave them all time to look through the demands that we wrote down, to make any amendments that they would like, and then we voted on it. And we had a 100% approval rate for these demands, directives, whatever you want to call it, they're semantics. Cool. Next. So how do we go from here? This is the hard part because it's very easy to do the planning, to say you want this and this, right? You want nice, beautiful schools with functioning bathrooms and classes that really engage you. You could say that, but creating the action plan is much harder. Next slide. Thank you. So a quick summary of what our demands say. The first one demands, and this is the central one as well, demands that we create and revitalize student power structures. In the document that we wrote it in, we named them as student defense committees, which ideally are reminiscent of unions. They're there to represent students at disciplinary meetings. They're there at SPMT meetings. They're there to create and amend school policy and to be in the room when curriculum is being discussed and changed. Next, we have clean and functioning facilities. We demand that all students have clean, well-maintained bathrooms, that students are accountable to the facilities that they steward, and that there's more transparency in how our facilities are funded and maintained. The third one is also very ambitious. We demand that all students, that our curriculum doesn't ask us to adapt to the world, but rather change it. Being more at the forefront of knowledge and wisdom and not letting that be held by the ivory tower in New Haven. This would, like the rest of these demands, this includes having strong student power structures again. Our main goal for this year and next year is to create those structures so that students can be included in the room. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. These decisions are already done democratically in principle through SPMT meetings, through Board of Education meetings, through teaching and learning committee meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're focusing on is how do we create an organized body of students that can act as one while still holding on to that diversity and plurality of thought. Then for our fourth and final demand is safer schools for all. I also wanted to give a kudos to the New Haven climate movement that was here. In this, we included that the board remain accountable to the climate emergency resolution that they passed a couple months ago, as well as the demands that youth activists came up with in May 2022, when over 700 students walked out for police-free schools. Again, if you would like a full detailed copy, and it's detailed, please feel free to approach us and we'll provide you with one. So again, those are our demands. Now it's about how we implement them. And one of the things that we're trying to focus on is tradition. High school students are a very transitory population. We're not staff, we're not paid to be here, right? Like we're here for 4 years to get a free public education, then we're out and you don't think about high school until you're in your 40s and reminiscing about it. What we're doing then is we created what's called the New Haven Student Defense Collective. And we launched 3 pilot branches in ESUMS, Wilbur Cross, and Co-op. These are not to replace existing student councils, but rather show an example of how proper functioning and strong student councils should look like. Right now, student councils in the high schools are they focus a lot, for example, on planning social events. Our vision is, yes, that, and also how do we influence school culture in a way that is on paper, that is legitimate, and that is recognized. Our eventual plan is to hopefully revitalize student councils, committees, student defense branches, whatever you want to call it, in all high schools and all elementary and middle schools. One of the main things that we present, this same presentation was given to the October's citywide student council meeting. And one of the main things that we organized is that these student defense branches, these student committees are not a social club. They're not a social planning committee. They are not a friend group, and they are not a service provider. And so we're trying to build a tradition of disciplined organizing, talking to students that you don't know and advocating on their behalf. Let me rephrase, not advocating on their behalf, but letting them advocate for themselves. Next one. Mr. Wade. Yeah, I think this is, so to recap really quickly, what these student defense branches are expected to do are to connect with administrators and create relationships with student leaders and teachers and administration, to speak at Board of Education meetings and SPMT meetings, to help co-create and amend school policy, and to plan conferences and assemblies to get feedback from all students. We're especially focused on the students that are not typically represented in student government. When you think of student councils right now, you often get a very self-selective population. There are students who are already successful in school, who have the resources to succeed, who have the time and energy to go to Hull House every month and eat about this for 2.5 hours. What we're imploring that these student defense branches do is reach out to those kids that never get heard or are never allowed to talk. The students that are involved with the criminal justice system, the students that are usually skipping, the students that are not engaged in class. And again, this is to build a mutual accountability. This is to create accountability for the board to the students and from students to the district to each other and to teachers. So these are the branches that we've started. We have John Carlos leading the Wilbur Cross one with Sanaya, Co-op, Layla, Isams, Ela, and Tylin, and Isla and I and John Carlos kind of help coordinate the whole thing. It's not very hierarchical. It's not very top down. There's another citywide student council meeting this Friday at 9 till 12-ish at Hill House High School. Yeah, like 10 is you, yeah. We definitely invite all of you to join and see us in action. This week, we'll be focusing on what makes good organizing. So that was a brief report. If there are any questions, we're here. Yeah, thank y'all so much.
Questions or comments for the students? Dr. Yarborough, Mr. Wilcox?
Yes, thank you. Want to thank you for preparing your material in advance and really creating just a clear outline of what you're looking for, what might improve the district, and showing the collaboration that has happened along the way, and also kind of the trajectory for how to implement what you're speaking about. It was helpful for me to read through the thoughts and also hear you talk about where certain names came from, like the defense, student defense, and just the placement of particular priorities. So thank you very much for walking through this and continuing the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Mr. Wilcox and then Dr. Joyner.
Yes, I'll be brief. Just thank you very much for this presentation and the accompanying document that goes more fully into the ideas. Do appreciate that. Couple things that I really did also appreciate was, I mean, the amount of work that's gone into this, the amount of numbers of student input. I like to hear I liked hearing that, you know, the awareness that there's existing structures that could be utilized in this, but also not just relying on the existing structures, but adding to those where needed or where they're not effective. So I appreciated that. I appreciate the idea that this is a 2 to 5 year window or a plan there, understanding that some changes take longer than others. And so I think the challenge will be just like you mentioned with the not the itinerant, but the student population that grows up and moves on, keeping that going. So I imagine you all are planning on that structures. Finally, I just wanted to say that, and I suggest we all, because we're all on various committees and things, that we take a look at this, not just the solutions, but the problems that it's also floating to the top that each of the committees. So I know I'm on three committees, at least 2 of them, you know, the citywide building and stewardship for facilities related issues, finance and operations for the obvious financial ones. I also handle the Head Start committee. So I don't know if you wanted to bring down to the pre-K level, the organizing, maybe that's a little early, but at least 2 of the 3 committees taking a look at it from there as to what's actionable, what's not, what more information we need, solutions or ideas, and I'd be happy to meet with you all or anybody else on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Dr. Joyner, did you?
Yeah, I did. I would like to commend all of the students who developed this, and to actually remark that I wish the House of Representatives, at least one side of the House of Representatives, operated this way, because this has been pretty inclusive, even though it left out the oldest high school in the district, and the high school that produced Constance Baker Motley and a number of other people who were moving in this way. But I don't think that was done deliberately. I think that it would do all of you wise to study the history of social reform movements in this country, most notably the abolitionist movement and the civil rights movement, because those movements served as a template for what you're trying to do. Now you're building on that, quite frankly. And those movements made it possible for you to be here doing what you're doing now. Had it not been for those two movements, it's highly likely that the board wouldn't look like what it looks like. And holding up that movement in certain parts of the country makes it possible for all people to come forward, no matter what their adjectives are. And one other thing I'd like to add is that if you look back over those movements, no one could say that they were not morally responsible. It was high moral ideals that stimulated the abolitionist movement, as well as the civil rights movement, the gay rights movement, the women's movement, all came out of those movements. And those are facts. And so moral principles have to drive everything you do. No one can ever criticize you on the basis of the fact that you don't have the high moral high ground. And I think you've tried to do that, Dave, and I can't say enough about that. I also have some more books for you, but we'll talk about that. I'll text you and let you know what those are. But I like this in a lot of ways. And I also believe that students can do a lot more to improve the climate of the school, a whole lot more. And they did those kinds of things when I was teaching back at Hill House and at Lee in the late 60s and early 70s. In fact, one of them is on the board now, an elected member, Darnell Golson, and he can teach you a lot about how that happened during the time of the Panthers and the civil rights movement and all the injustices that we all are not proud of. So thank you so much. And I'd rather have, if I had my way, you and your colleagues would be in the House of Representatives, because you make more sense and you care more about the human race than some of these people that have been elected to represent this great country. So thanks a lot. Keep up the good work.
I'm a little young for the Panther.
But you were a Kit Kat.
My father was a Panther, actually.
And a Marine.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Dr. Benitez?
I also want to echo the voice of my colleagues on the board in terms of this presentation. Quality is really, I am so proud that we have students who can do that when some people in the suburbs and in other places think that we don't educate. Even some of the people who live in our city think that we cannot educate our students in our public schools. But this is a real proof that we are educating children and that children are being challenged to the point that they can come and say, hey, we are missing these things. And I want to tell you that a school that is strong has students involved in school governance. And you are in the right track. I think it will take a lot of work because, it's hard for adults to think that young people know what they need. Even though we all say we do, we always, cringe. But I will tell you this, as a principal, the best learning I had was when I was challenged by students, when students asked me to think twice about what I was doing, deciding, or ruling on. So I congratulate you on this thinking. I believe that our district is able to work with you on this. We, as a Comer district, years ago, we were very much flexible as educators to include parent voice, which is now something that should be part of every school by state law, not just by us saying that, but we did it before they put it as a state law that the schools had to have parent governance in every school. But I really believe you are on the right track, and I'm proud. I am proud of being a New Haven public school former educator and a Board of Ed member in this city. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, and also acknowledging what Dr. Joyner said, we are not new to this at all. Don't want to ramble, won't, but acknowledging that a lot of the lessons that we're implementing now come from places like student movements on college campuses who've had, even if it was short-term, success in influencing how student power works and how academics works in universities. And from that, we're learning how to keep that energy, but also being disciplined and being open to, again, plurality of thought and methods. So thank you, and we look forward to working with you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Benitez.
Madam President,
Mr. Golton?
I just wanted to say, I think the students did a terrific job in the work they put in to put this document together. And the presentation was great. And I want to ditto Dr. Benitez's comments. Power is never given, almost never given freely. So expect some real work in convincing people to give power to the students. And you always have my support on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Golton. Okay, teaching and learning report, Dr. Joyner.
I'm going to have to ask to amend the agenda so that I can ask for approval of the field trips. And that was my responsibility. So what I want to do now is to request, I want to make a motion to amend the agenda to include an item that is in your packet, and that is the field trips that we approved at our last TL meeting last Wednesday. And I'm respectfully asking for a second.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner and Mr. Golton.
Second, sorry, I didn't have my mouth up.
Thank you. Any discussion?
If we could move the one on the bottom, the Wilbercross High School trip to Costa Rica, Charlene Woodland. We have personal relationships to that, and so we'd like to abstain.
Oh, but it's not a conflict of interest. You just happen to be a student in the school.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, bet.
It really isn't. It really isn't. So, Madam Chair, I'm motioning to move approval by the board of the field trips specifically specified in the board packet. For this school year.
Hold on, we have to, hold on, Dr. Joyner.
Oh, you gotta do
amending the
part
agenda.
one first. I'm sorry. Part one
Yes.
first.
Any discussion on amending the agenda to include the field trips?
Nope.
Seeing none, we'll vote on those items. Dr. Joyner, on that item, sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Golton?
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox?
Yes.
Dr. Benitez?
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz Bustamante?
Yes.
Mr. Musser?
Yes.
Mayor Elicker?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well, so that item passes. And now you can make the motion, Dr. Joyner.
Okay, Madam Chair, I move to approve the field trips listed in the board packet for the 2023-2024 school year for New Haven Public Schools.
For a second?
Second.
Properly seconded. Any discussion?
Madam President.
Mr. Golson and then Mr. Wilcox?
This will be the first time you ever hear this on the record, but my vote is up for sale. If I can get any of these trips, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Golson. Mr. Wilcox?
I just want to say I'm glad to see international trips back on the agenda. It's such an opportunity for kids to travel, see the world. And I know there's good learning opportunities attached to each one of these. It's just not a vacation. They're going to learn. And my kids have in their past, one of my kids was able to do this. When another one of my kids, her trip was canceled because of COVID closures and so on. So I am just happy to see this back. And so many nice places to be.
Agreed. Thank you, Mr. Wilcox.
Madam President.
Madam Elicker.
Mayor Elicker, Mayor Elicker, and then Mr. Golson.
Sure. I said this a long time ago, but I generally think that the board's role is not to micromanage field trips of students. If we ever want to change our bylaws, I'd be very open to eliminating that authority because it seems like it's getting a little bit too much into the weeds of what should be the superintendent and her team's role. But I definitely support this, of course, tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Elicker. Mr. Goldson?
Thank you, Madam President. I was on the board when we decided to approve these trips. We had more authorities to approve. We actually reduced our role. But I think it was important for us to continue, especially on international trips, to have at least knowledge of these trips because things happen on these international trips. And we had a whole discussion around what the federal government's travel advisory were on these different countries and so on. I think it's important for us as a board to continue to have some say because if something happens, it always comes back to us anyhow as a board, right? We should be ultimately responsible. So if a teacher or principal makes a decision, or the superintendent makes a decision to send some kids to a country where something happens that shouldn't happen, that we approved it and they're taking off the hook. It's our responsibility. This buck should stop with us at the end of the day on these trips. And my earlier comment about being bought, I'd like to amend that to say I'm not interested in Quebec or whatever this other country is that the sound is going to.
Okay.
I don't even know what that is.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Goldson. Dr. Yarborough?
Thank you. I support the trips and appreciate the teachers, the staff for bringing the students to these new experiences. Just a question on finances. I imagine the cost of these trips has likely increased over past years. And I'm just curious, is it a dramatic increase that the teachers and families are seeing, or do the price of the trips still seem in reach based on kind of previous years that we've taken them?
Can I amend?
Dr. Joyner or?
Can I amend that
staff?
question? Can I amend that question? Can I add to that question?
Sure.
I'm assuming that the schools and the students raised the money to pay for the trip per person. Does
See
the
a nod over there, Dr. White is nodding.
that includes paying for the chaperones, or do the chaperones pay their own ways? I just want to know.
I'm not sure about the chaperones, but we could get information on that added for a next meeting, just information.
Do we as a school system help with fundraising on this at all? What's that?
They're fundraising.
The schools are, and the Board of Ed or the administration doesn't participate in that fundraising process at all?
Doesn't or does not?
Well, I'm asking, do we or do we not?
So many of the teachers that are sponsoring the trips, they will participate with the students to also fundraise for support for the trips.
And I'm curious about Mr. Yarborough's question about prices compared now to last year and the year before, whatever.
We can get back to you on that information. This is the first set of trips we've taken since the pandemic hit.
Okay.
For fundraising
Okay.
purposes, it might be nice to have all these trips listed in one place that supporters can go to for our international trips to be able to give and donate to them.
Yes.
That's a great idea.
Yes.
I would like to see, all eligible students for whom these trips are designed, to be able to make them.
Yes.
Okay, I think I can give you, since I'm still reporting.
Dr. Joyner?
Yeah, I think I can give you a little history on that. And I know I'm gonna get an amen from at least one board member. In many of the earlier cases, teachers were going and volunteering their own time. And we had Operation Europe, and then as Hill House began to change, the students wanted Operation Africa as well. And so we actually raised the money to support the students because many students could not afford to go to Europe. So we had fundraisers, dances, and if there's another board member who would like to comment on that. And then with Operation Africa was Red Verderam, and he was work for the State Department, and we were able to raise money. So we had dances and, you know, that old time religion, cake sales and all that other stuff. What you're suggesting, I think, should be put into policy, that we have a central site where we try to generate support and revenues for students in our system that are eligible for various types of field trips. Because one of the things that I think that we should be doing is that they should be going down to the South. I sent 2 students to North Carolina for 2 weeks when I was teaching, so that they could see the difference between integrated schools in the South and integrated schools in the North, as well as to understand that history. And they actually went to my hometown and studied with some of my former teachers, Darlene Gates and Carmen Ray. So I think as a policy operation, we ought to be looking at all these kinds of things. And while we have this team of people, try to develop as much policy as possible to support that, so that it'll be something that we can pass on to the next leader. I also believe that we should invest within the superintendent authority to identify the trips that she supports based on criteria that we give her. So it'll cover the whole notion of being afraid of maybe sending a kid to a terrorist in a situation, because people are being kidnapped now and all like that. So I think that's the good work we can do on the board over the next several years, so that we can give her that. Now, if we're done talking about like this, I only have 2 other items for teaching and learning.
I like to make one more point on this one.
Mr. Goldson and then Dr. Yarborough.
Point one, I believe that the superintendent does have some authority here. I don't think a field trip could come to us before it comes to the superintendent, before she approves it. I believe that's the policy that was in place a few years ago, and I think it probably still is. Is that correct, Superintendent?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And secondly, I agree with Dr. Joyner. I think this stuff is important. I was just looking at some pictures just the other day of when my 6th grade class from Lincoln Bassett went to Washington, D.C. and we did the trip every year. And we stayed at an Army barracks. I remember being in line and eating those mushy eggs and whatnot. But we did a whole tour of the Capitol, and it's pictures. That's, golly, over 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And it's still something that's still in my head. It was still important to my growth and my understanding of this world. And I think we need to do more of that. There used to be, I think every year we used to go like to the Statue of Liberty and all kinds of field trips. We just don't do this stuff anymore. I think that we should encourage it so that our kids do have a worldview, and that we should be helping to support and fundraise. We should be cheerleaders for that as a board and as an organization. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson. Dr. Yarborough?
Yes, thank you. I'm in favor of just Dr. Joyner, what you spoke about in terms of a central site or location that highlights these trips and opportunities. And as well, if there is a video of Mr. Goldson hosting a dance, I will pay money extra towards these international trips for the fundraising video of you, Mr. Goldson, hosting a dance. So if we can get that done, that'll be extra.
Wow, I may be willing to do that. Dr. Jordan's been trying to get me to do that for years. That might be my contribution to this school system.
You'll have time now.
I'll have time now, right? I don't know if anybody wants to see that, but I'll certainly be willing to do it.
See, I knew you when you were you look like a fashion model.
Oh God.
I got pictures. You and Tracina Gray. But anyway, let me finish my report if there are no other.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Mr. Goldson.
I only have 2 other things.
I think we need to vote, don't we?
Oh, I thought we did.
Oh, yes, we're voting on the field trips. Mr. Wilcox?
Yes.
Dr. Joyner?
Yes.
Dr. Benitez?
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
Mr. Goldson?
Yes.
Cruz Bustamante,
Yes.
Mr. Musser,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well, and so that item passes.
I have two other items, data and curriculum. We're gonna be meeting, TNL on Wednesday, and we're gonna try to identify the important data we should be collecting and try to move toward how it's reported. I think the system is doing a really good job now, but I think we'd also have more efficient meetings if we gave them advance notice of the kind of data that we need. I can say that I don't think we have the staff that we should have. Matt made the point about the very end. Because I think we only have one person, but we've got to figure out a way to get it done, because data are the ways in which we can assess progress. And so that's important. The other part relates to the discussion about the curriculum. And I think this was a very important moment, the presentation. I'll start calling you Harmony now, Dave, since you have chosen to use that name, and I'll honor that. And I like Harmony. I should sing, still do. Anyway, so we have a curriculum in place that really, I believe, examines the truth of this country's history without condemnation. It happened, and we're trying to improve it. And we also have to have a curriculum that's inclusive, so that every single human being in the room does not feel like he or she is being castigated, attacked, or demonized. And I think we're moving in that direction. And so I think as we move forward with TL, that the data that we report is critically important. And to me, one of the most important data sets is what are the entry level of students who come into our system in kindergarten, and how many kids are eligible for kindergarten, but yet we have empty seats. Because I believe you have to look at a student's academic and social development history over the course of the time that they cry into the world. They come into a school, they come into families first, they come into school systems, and they go to other institutions. And recognizing that the context in which we educate them has as much of an influence on how well they achieve, perhaps more, believe it or not, than the school does. And we have to address those issues. So we don't have that. I don't think we have those systems in place now. I don't think too many school systems do. But we've got to know what they're like when we get them in the first place. We have to know whether or not there's a distinction between students who attend school well and those who don't. I think everybody knows that there's likely a difference unless you're a genius. And we have to factor that into our programs. And in order to do that, we have to be a learning community. Everybody talks about it takes a whole village. We have not created that village yet, but we're trying. So I'm not going to say anything more. I'll have more to say after we have our meeting on Wednesday. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Facilities Naming Committee report, questions or comments for Dr. Joyner on that one? Okay. Facilities Naming Committee report, Dr. Joyner?
Yes, I'm going to have another meeting with Eric Schultz this week to see where we are on setting up the apparatus on the district side so that we can generate a voting system, and then people can make recommendations to the board based on that. For the two specific candidates that have been on the docket for a long time, Hazel Pappas and Dr. Lonnie Garris. And I've also gotten requests for Peter Evans and Bob Lamel. But Dr. Hazel Pappas and Dr. Garris are the ones that we really have to, I guess, move with some sense of urgency to make a decision, yeah or nay. And so I'll meet with Eric this week to try to make sure we get that done, and we can proceed with that. That concludes my report on facilities naming.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Questions or comments for Dr. Joyner? Okay, I do not have a president's report tonight. Head Start report, Mr. Wilcox.
Just very briefly, just a reminder to the board that our meeting this week on Thursday will be governance training from the Head Start office about the role of the board in governing a Head Start program. So just reiterate the invitation for everybody to join us.
What time is the meeting, Mr. Wilcox?
I believe it is, I want to say it's 5 o'clock on Thursday. I've sent it to the board. I'm happy to send it again. It's a Zoom meeting and it's interesting training about, you know, how Head Start works and the governance and policy councils and all that. So it's interesting.
Questions or comments from Mr. Wilcox? Okay, citywide school building committee report.
Just to let y'all know, we did meet last Thursday, and as typical, a big chunk of the meeting is dedicated to a high-level overview of all the different projects throughout the district related to facilities. So I invite everybody to take a look at that. It's posted on the website.
Questions or comments for Mr. Wilcox? Okay, finance and operations.
The thing I want to highlight here is just that it's in the board packets. We had a brief presentation on the timeline for the putting out the transportation contract, which is scheduled to go out later in a week, 2 weeks, I think, or the 20th of this month. So about a week. So that has a timeline that lists out everything. I think the key thing is that it'll be primed for success in terms of coming to the board in enough time to deal with any issues, and then also so that we can have closure on that before we present our overall budget for the district to the alders. I'm sure that's something they're going to want to know is outcome of the transportation.
Questions or comments for Mr. Wilcox? Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Governance report, Dr. Benitez.
We have not met, we will meet again on the 27th of this month. As you can see, we have been very ambitious trying to get policies updated. And as I said before, a lot of our policies are from 1995, and we are trying to make sure that we update those as fast as we can. But I get the message, and like I've been told before, slower we can get things done better. So I will continue. I won't stop, but I will bring things in smaller chunks. Thank you.
Questions or comments for Dr. Benitez? Okay, thank you, Dr. Benitez. Food Service Task Group report. Dr. Yarborough?
Hi,
Dr.
yes.
Jordan, were you saying something?
I was just commending Dr. Benitez. She's worked very hard on this. And the reason she had so much to bring to us because she was working on so much. So I just want to say that.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Dr. Yarborough.
Thank you. Yes, for the Food Service Task Group, the District Food Service Group, in collaboration with Blue Earth Compost and other groups, has implemented a pilot program. And it's begun in Barnard, Eastham's High School in the Community, John Martinez, and New Haven Academy. And the focus is on food recovery, food scraps composting, environmental classroom activities, and there are partnerships that have been established that will facilitate the collection and redistribution of surplus food from school cafeterias. There's more information on food sustainability efforts in our October 11th meeting minutes. And we also discussed at that committee meeting collecting the data on what we're doing, how we're making progress as a district, what the associated costs are, because these pilot programs are being funded. So what the associated costs are and what it will look like if we expand this to full district. So the goal and idea is to do less things piecemeal, school by school, but to find something sustainable where we learn from what goes well at various schools and do something sustainable across the district. This week, the week of December, not this week, but the week of December 11th to December 15th, the food service director is preparing for a statewide audit. And the whole food service division has been preparing for this, both in written format and also for site visits that will occur. And want to also mention our food distribution during our food gap season. So one is coming up for the December time, and the committee is a collaboration of stakeholders that include New Haven community groups, upstate groups, and also our food service director and staff here. That date for food distribution is December 27th from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. And the sites are the Truman School, Lincoln Bassett School, the Shack West Hills Community Center, and John Martinez School. The district will send out information. Other community partners will also send out information. And soon the minutes from our November 8th meeting will be posted where people can find more information. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yarborough. Questions or comments for Dr. Yarborough? Okay, I didn't think we were gonna make it to executive session tonight. I will make a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 12006B and 1201B 9 and 10 regarding reports and statements of strategy or negotiations with respect to collective bargaining local 3429, Council for AFSME and AFL-CIO. Also, that we go into executive session pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 12006B and 1210B 4 and 10 concerning strategy and negotiations with respect to pending litigation in the matter of CHRO X related to racial gen versus BOE, including discussion which would result in the disclosure of attorney-client privilege communications. For this first executive session, we're inviting, for the first part of the executive session, we're inviting Dr. Negron, Attorney Alexiades, Attorney Cieda Milan, and Ms. Lisa Fledgler. Then for the second part, we'll let Ms. Lisa Fledgler leave and invite Ms. Tiffany Jackson.
And you also need attorney.
And we also, Attorney Alexiades?
The second executive session, consider including Jackson and also Attorney
Rebecca Goldberg.
Okay, and so for the second session, we'll add Attorney Rebecca Goldberg.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
Seeing none, we'll vote to go into executive session. Mr. Golton?
Yes.
Dr. Benitez?
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox?
Yes.
Dr. Joyner?
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz Bustamante?
Yes.
Mr. Musser?
Yes.
Mayor Elicker?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. The link was sent by Ms. Viviana Camacho.
Are you back?
I'm back. Can you hear me, Ann?
I can hear you, but I cannot
Okay, here we
hear.
go. I'm live.
Oh,
Everyone's gone here.
I'm live.
The room is empty. The chairs are
Okay.
put up, the tables are put down.
We are out of executive session and back in regular session. There were no votes in executive session. I do have a motion to approve the proposed settlement in CHRO EX X route. X-Rel again, I don't know, Rachel Jen, and authorize superintendent, Dr. Madeline Negron to execute settlement agreement, stipulation, and other necessary documents.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on that item. Mr. Goldson?
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox?
Yes.
Dr. Joyner?
Yes.
Dr. Benitez?
yes.
Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
Students are gone, mayor is gone. I am a yes as well. Thank you. That item passes.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Mr. Wilcox?
Yes.
Dr. Joyner?
Yes.
Dr. Benitez?
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
Mr. Goldson?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well.